your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. These words by Leonard Cohen, I'm reading from my newsletter, the first part of which I shared on the internet last night. These words by Leonard Cohen provide good focus for the holiday season. Few of us have the perfect Norman Rockwell gatherings we see on so many Christmas cards. Some families may look that way on the surface, but you don't have to scratch very deep to see the burdens that are there in all our families. Our kids may live far away. One or more may not be in touch with us all that much. Hard to imagine when we remember how close we were to them when they were 8 and 9 years old. Aches and pains remind us that our time here on this earth is ticking down. Many of you have taken some big hits this year. Big hits. A divorce, a stroke, cancer, an untimely death, a medical condition that scares the daylights out of you. And remember that Christmas comes at the darkest time of the year. If you will look around, you'll find signs of that darkness in every life. Every family has somebody who's suffering. Relationships that are strained and broken. When I was 15, my Uncle Doug was 52. This would have been 1967. I loved my Uncle Doug. He was my mom's brother. He had a great sense of humor. He was funny. And the thing that I liked about him the most was he played great practical jokes. In church, at my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary celebration, he placed a whoopee cushion under my grandma Childs in my Baptist church. It was so Baptist. And Uncle Doug was so Uncle Doug, he couldn't go there. Not sure they'd have him. But I have to tell you, I loved him more than any religious person I know. And I felt that God's Spirit was channeling more through him than any relative I knew. He was funny, drank a little too much sometimes, smoked way too much. When the floods came in 1930-something, when all those big floods came, he had a rowboat, and he was an Explorer Scout. He was all excited, so we have old pictures of him with his rowboat and the motors going up and down Main Street and on people's front porches and looking in their houses and stuff, in their front doors, seeing the water which rose in my grandparents' old Victorian house up to the porch and then halfway up the windows, much like what happened in Binghamton and around these parts. He had carrier pigeons. That was part of his Explorer Scout thing, so he had a bunch of cages with pigeons in the backyard going, I don't know where they went, but they carried stuff. That's why they called them carrier pigeons. And the thing I loved about him the most was he was on the school board. Everybody loved Uncle Doug. And he had a heart for kids who were really retarded. He also had a heart for kids with learning disabilities. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't know any better. I remember when I was 10 or 11 years old, we were joking around, call somebody a retard, you know, that's just what you did when you were kids. And this was at a family gathering, and he was a short man, but a strong, kind of burly man. And I felt this angry man's hand on my shoulder, and he jerked me back. And he took my face, and he took it to his, and he said, I don't want to hear you ever say anything disparaging like that about kids who have problems learning. Huh? You know how it is with your chipped tooth in front that people make fun of? You know how you feel? Multiply that by 100. That's how they feel. I got it. And I thank God for Uncle Doug. Sometime in early December, He was a salesman. He was up in Laconia Notch, New Hampshire. We got a call that Uncle Doug had had a stroke, an aneurysm, and they were bringing him home in an ambulance during Advent season. Got to the hospital, and we found that he had an aneurysm on his brain, and it was leaking a little bit. And they were going to try to do some brain surgery and go in and kind of encase it in plastic to stop the bleeding. Well, they did the surgery, and he was better for a day or two, but it must have leaked some more, because then he wasn't able to talk at all, and one whole part of his right side was paralyzed. The only thing he could say was, damn, damn, damn. He knew he was about to meet his Maker. And so we held vigil for him for about 3 weeks. He hung on. People would go over day and night. And we were told that he'd probably pass in the night, as people often do, about 2 or 3 in the morning. That's when their metabolism is at its weakest. And I remember the night, I was laying in bed, and the phone rang down the hall. And my dad went down the hall to answer it and said yes. I said, okay. He hung up. And I heard him call down the dark hall to us in the middle of the night, my brother and sister and I, and my mother, my Uncle Doug's brother, and he said, it's over. We all came out of our rooms, and the only thing that we lit was the Christmas tree in the living room. And we sat on the couch. My dad held my mom, and we cried. Now, as I've said, my dad was kind of a crotchety guy, sometimes short-fused and quick to anger. But he was never more of a father to us than he was that night. When these things happen, it can bring out the Christ. It can bring out the best in us. And we were never more a family than we were that night. People who sit in darkness can see a great light if you're looking for it. First in your own heart, to share it with somebody else. I don't know why, but after Jazzy died, I felt moved to call Julie. And I wanted you just to send me some emails about your memories of her. I guess she was a handful sometimes.
Could be.
I guess she had a really good spirit, a good sense of humor, and was playful and loving. I see some smiles back there. The memory that I liked was when you were over her house or she was over yours, and the way kids do, they're rushing down the hallway to try to get by somebody, and fully half of her body ran into half of yours and just about knocked you into the wall. And you said to her, Jazzy, you can't walk through people, you know. And she said, sometimes I think I can. And there's a whole bunch of other memories that you wrote. But I'm not going to read them. I'm going to put them in this box. It says Jazzy's Memory Box on it. And what I would like you and your family to do is maybe get one of those little notepads, the little yellow ones with the sticky things on them, and have them in each of your houses, and neighbors too. And each time you have a memory of Jazzy, write it down and put it in this box. And you can keep it in a special place. If you want to give it to me or have somebody in your family, you can type it up and make a book of them 12 months from now. And that could be a Christmas present to each other next year. So that's for you. Last night on Facebook, yesterday, Julie had some pictures out of Jazzy that she posted, and she said something about, make sure you take lots of pictures because you never know. This might be all you have left someday. Well, I've got an idea. I don't want us to have to wait till one of us dies before we tell each other the things we love about each other. Now you've got, all of you, a page, hopefully, that came with your bulletin. And on top it says, Christmas 2013. This Christmas, I love and admire you for. My mom began having her series of little strokes that within 5 years finally took her. I came up with an idea like this. I said, Mom, this Christmas I love and admire you for. And I wrote down all the things I loved about her. The way she took care of Grandpa and Gram when they got old and made it so, you know, they could stay in their house a real long time, and take Gram out to dinner every single night after Gramp died. I loved her gentleness. I loved so many things about her. And I wrote them down, and I put it in a cheap frame from CVS, and I gave it to her for Christmas. And it was on her organ for the next 4 or 5 years till she died at home. And so what I'd like you to do, I made 100 of them, so you can take as many as you want. There are blue papers on the table, and you've got one. You can copy them off at home. I want you to make one of these for some of the special people in your life, even you kids, and give it to your parents or your brothers or your sisters, grandparents, friends, next door neighbors. And I guarantee you this will be one of the most touching Christmas gifts that you give, a gift from the heart. I was doing the adult class at Tabernacle Church before I came here. And I'm always struck by this whole concept of angels. Back in the Middle Ages, they thought they were real. In fact, the brilliant theologians back then, you know, we religious types think of fascinating things to think about and argue about. They used to argue about how many angels could stand on the head of a pin. Pretty profound, huh? Mm-hmm. Well, we know in this age that angels, we don't worry about their wingspan, how big they are, whatever. We know angels come in lots of different, more spiritual ways. So I asked the folks who are gathered there how they've been touched by an angel lately. And this one woman, Alona, who lost her partner a couple of years ago to this awful, awful disease that took him slowly, and he was bleeding and hemorrhaging. It was just awful. She raised her hand and she said, Ricky died in October. A couple of weeks before Christmas, I was walking in Otsenango Park. Anybody know where that is? It's just north of Binghamton. People go there to walk. And I was walking by myself, and this other woman came up to me and said, Hi, I'm Teresa. What's your name? And she said, Alona. And Teresa said, my husband died 4 months ago. Alona didn't know this woman. And Alona said, my husband died 2 months ago. No more words were spoken. They embraced each other and sobbed. Now she belongs to a bereavement group that she still goes to 2 years later. She's still suffering, but doing a lot better. And some of the women in that group are Catholic. And one of the women said, why, Saint Teresa of the Flowers is the patron saint who comes to those who are grieving. You get it? Saint Teresa of the Flowers. This lady's name was Teresa, came out of the blue, never met her before, never has seen her since. My husband died. Your husband died. And she knew to speak to her. And they embraced. I was talking with Margaret French on the phone this week. Margaret also knows what it means to lose a daughter during the holiday season. She also knows, Julie, what it's like to have a dark night of the soul in the holiday season. She said, I asked her if there was anything she could share with folks here, especially those of you who are grieving. that might be helpful, that helped her get through it. And she said on November 6, 2002, Dorlin Bergen came over, said she had bad news. Marlene had called Dorlin, and Dorlin told Margaret. She was in a state of shock, Margaret was. Dorlin was good enough to stay with her a long time. She said, I came out of shock at the funeral. Marlene and Wayne were to speak about Sharon. Wayne wasn't able to finish. And it dawned on Margaret then, that she had to be comforting her kids too. She couldn't get lost in her own grief. It brought her out of it as she realized others were mourning too, and that this way was God's way of helping her. She also wants to thank Pastor Kip for his help, who also helped Wayne. And she also wants to thank people in this community, in this church, who reached out to her in ways large and small, if only to speak a kind word or a gentle touch. She saw that as God's way of comforting her. Thanks for sharing that, Margaret. Christmas does come at the darkest time of the year. But the people in darkness have seen a great light. And the way we find that light, as Margaret found that light, is even as we're suffering, we reach out to the people in the same room, in the same house, in the same community, who are suffering too. Now, if you'll bear with me a minute, I'm going to try to cue up a film which I'd like to end our message here this morning.